Penny and Karissa Budro went to the local store for groceries. In the car, Penny and her daughter had an argument, so Penny went to do the shopping by herself. Karissa decided to wait for her in the car. When the woman returned to the car after 15 minutes, Karissa was nowhere to be found. 13 days later, on February 19, 2008, her remains were found on the riverbank, and the clothing indicated that before taking her life, someone might have subjected her to abuse. What happened to 12-year-old Karissa Budro? Why did she leave the car wearing inadequate clothing for winter, and what monster could be responsible for such a cruel crime? On January 27, 2008, at 8:30 p.m., Penny Budro called the police to report her daughter's disappearance. She informed the Bridgewater Police in Nova Scotia, Canada, that on that day around 5:30 p.m., she had an argument with Karissa. Penny left the car parked at the store and went inside to do some shopping while Karissa remained in the car. When Penny returned from the store after 15 minutes, Karissa was no longer there. The distraught mother searched the area, trying to find her daughter, and eventually called the police. Extensive search efforts were initiated to find the missing girl. Family members did everything possible to locate Karissa, distributing flyers, creating social media pages, and raising funds for a search campaign. However, the search was hindered by severe snowstorms, particularly affecting the possibility of deploying helicopters. With each passing hour, concerns for Karissa's safety grew. Eventually, the weather cleared, and divers were able to explore the LaHave River. They spent 2 days investigating the riverbed and were confident that Karissa was not there. 2 days after Karissa's disappearance became known, the heartbroken mother appeared before journalists, pleading for her daughter to come back home. She revealed that Karissa was dressed inadequately for the weather, wearing only clothing suitable for milder conditions and Crocs. When asked about the cause of their argument, Penny explained that it was a minor issue. She had taken Karissa to the store to talk with her in the car because she knew her daughter wouldn't slam the door loudly, as she sometimes did at home. Karissa did not want to go inside the store, which was perfectly normal behavior. Penny stated that Karissa was not in the car when she returned, and it seemed like the girl had decided to run away from home after the argument. The Bridgewater Police conducted numerous investigations, interviewing classmates, teachers, relatives, and friends of the girl. They also pursued leads that reported sightings of Karissa in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Ontario. On February 1st, for the second time, Karissa's mother pleaded for her safe return home. "I just want to tell you how many people love you and want you to come home," she said tearfully. The woman urged anyone who might know where Karissa was to persuade her to contact her mother and admitted that not knowing her child's whereabouts was incredibly difficult. On February 9th, 2 weeks after Karissa's disappearance, a woman reported that her 9-year-old son had found what appeared to be a frozen person in the snow on the banks of the LaHave River. The autopsy took several days, during which the devastated family anxiously awaited official confirmation that it was Karissa. Unfortunately, the body turned out to be hers. Initially, everyone believed that Karissa might have fallen, slipped, or experienced an unfortunate accident. However, the autopsy revealed that the cause of Karissa's death was asphyxiation. The town was horrified by this shocking discovery, as Bridgewater had not experienced such a terrible crime in nearly 20 years. It was also revealed that Karissa's jeans and underwear were partially pulled down, but the forensic expert did not find any signs of sexual assault in her final hours. As Karissa's body was found on the outskirts of Bridgewater, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police joined the investigation. John Elliott, a former sergeant of the RCMP, explains that they began exploring various possibilities of what could have happened. Initially, 2 individuals were arrested in connection with the crime, but they were quickly released. For 2 months, investigators searched for other potential suspects. They looked into the involvement of any suspicious individuals, including those with criminal records. However, no matter what leads they pursued, they kept circling back to Karissa's parents. There was a suspicion that Penny or Vernon Macumber, Penny's boyfriend, who who lived in an apartment together with the mother and daughter, might have been involved. The police simply couldn't find any other viable suspects. There was simply no reason for this young girl to disappear. Many, including Karissa's father, found it strange to believe that she ran away from home. How could she run away dressed so lightly for winter and wearing Crocs on her feet, especially with an approaching snowstorm that would have prevented her from going far? Paul Budro stuck to Penny's version of events, but deep down, he knew that something was amiss. He mentioned that upon arriving in Bridgewater, he noticed that Penny was more concerned about Vernon. He seemed to have a bruise or some injury on his leg, and she appeared to be more preoccupied with her boyfriend than with the search for her daughter. This observation shook Paul's confidence in what was happening. The Budro family has an unusual story that must be mentioned. Paul and Penny separated when Penny was pregnant with Karissa. After the breakup with Karissa's father, Penny entered a relationship with his brother, Shane. They broke up when Karissa was 10 years old. In December 2007, a month before the crime, Karissa expressed her thoughts on this matter in a series of handwritten notes found in her bedroom by the police. In one note dated December 2nd, Karissa wrote, "I'm angry because Mom is engaged to Vernon. Mom made me move here. Mom broke up with Shane. I need a bigger room. I don't like living with Vernon. The end. My life is ruined." At the end of the letter, she drew a heart and a star. The apartment where Penny, Vernon, and Karissa lived became a valuable source of evidence. Neighbors reported that the couple constantly argued after Karissa's disappearance. According to neighbors, Vernon shouted, "I know you did this, Penny, and why did you drag me into all of this?" These arguments occurred both during the initial investigation by the Bridgewater police and when the case was taken over by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Until that point, the police merely suspected Karissa's mother, but after observing her behavior at Karissa's funeral, where she was the only person who didn't shed a tear, they realized they were on the right track. "Every time I met her, she was very quiet, asked very few questions, especially when she was told that her daughter was found. She never asked what happened to Karissa. Not once," Elliot recalled. On February 14th, Vernon and Penny, who had been cooperating with the investigation, stopped communicating with the police when the couple was brought in for questioning, and effectively arrested. However, they were released the next day due to a lack of evidence against them. Elliot shared that as the couple was leaving the building, he couldn't help but advise Penny to constantly look over her shoulder because investigators would always be there. After that, a radical shift occurred in the investigation. The police, having examined all leads but still not obtaining any concrete evidence, decided to resort to a rather complex and controversial technique called Mr. Big. Sergeant Elliot coordinated the covert operation, which allowed them to obtain a confession to the crime. The Mr. Big procedure is a highly intricate technique of undercover investigation that enables the police to secure confessions from suspects in cases where all other avenues to find evidence have been exhausted and yielded no results. Typically, the police create an entirely fictitious criminal organization. After an extended period of interaction and gaining the suspect's trust, they invite the suspect to join the organization, but to do so, the suspect must disclose information about their own criminal past. The development process usually takes several weeks, during which the suspect gradually begins to trust the undercover agents. The controversial aspect of this method lies in the fact that sometimes detectives may overstep boundaries, coercing a person into confessing. In this case, the team took measures to ensure that everything went smoothly. The officers playing the roles of criminals knew nothing about Karissa's case, as they were instructed not to read or watch any news about it. Initially, investigators focused on Penny's boyfriend, Vernon McCumber, but it became clear fairly quickly that he was not involved in the crime. He may have had suspicions, but that was all. Subsequently, the investigators concentrated their efforts on Penny. For 4 months, they slowly approached the woman, gaining her trust. The officers posed as members of a criminal syndicate and hinted to Penny that they could help her destroy the evidence the police had against her. They told her that they would do so in exchange for a serious crime she would commit for them, but they also needed her to confess to what she had done to Karissa, and provide them with all the details of the crime. Budro took the bait and confessed, describing all the details of what happened. All her interactions with the police were recorded on video. Penny went so far as to demonstrate how she took her daughter's life. Elliot recalled, "We were in the next hotel room. We had a live feed, we could see everything happening in the room where Penny was. And we saw how events unfolded. We heard Penny, her own words when she described what she had done to her daughter, Karissa." The police never made the video or audio of Penny's confession public, but Elliot called that moment surreal. "When we all saw it, we looked at each other, and tears were in our eyes because we solved the case. We got justice for the family, but it was very difficult." Once Penny was shown a portion of the video recorded in the hotel, she confessed to everything. The veracity of her words was confirmed by her knowledge of details that the police had never disclosed to the media. Additionally, she showed the location of other pieces of evidence related to the case. Here's what actually happened. After leaving the store, Budro drove her daughter to the nearest road, where she ordered the girl to get out of the car. They argued again, and Penny pushed Karissa to the ground. Earlier, Penny had placed a beige toque in her pocket, which she now used to strangle her daughter, taking the weight of the heinous act on her soul. Penny admitted that her daughter was frightened and her last words were, "Mommy, don't." Then Penny took Karissa back to the car to move her to another location, closer to the riverbank. She adjusted the girl's clothing to give the impression of violence, although no such violence had occurred. Later, she disposed of some of Karissa's clothing and one of her Crocs in a trash bin near a local swimming pool. The other Croc fell off the girl's foot and remained at the first crime scene. Penny realized that due to the impending snowstorm, there would be plenty of snow to conceal her heinous crime. She confessed to having contemplated the murder for several days. Paul Budro stated that all of this was beyond his comprehension. How could someone go from being a loving mother to committing such a terrible crime in such a short time, when your daughter's last words in her life are, "Mommy, don't"? Paul was not the only one who couldn't understand why the woman decided to do such a thing to the girl, and her explanation shocked even the seasoned law enforcement officers. Penny claims that her boyfriend Vernon gave her an ultimatum: it was either him or her daughter. She said that she would do anything for Vernon, and the thought of losing her boyfriend was heavier than the thought of losing her daughter. Vernon, on the other hand, denies ever saying anything like that. He explained that Penny and her daughter were constantly arguing, and he simply suggested that something needed to change. He added that Penny and Karissa's relationship didn't seem healthy to him and believed that they needed to seek help from a psychologist. Most tragically, teenage Karissa did not need to live with her mother. During summer vacations, she happily stayed with her biological father, Paul Budro, but she asked him if he would mind if she returned to her mother. The girl missed her mom and apparently didn't think there was any danger in going back. Paul recalled, "I thought I was doing the right thing, allowing her to go back to her mother. It's what she wanted." So, even if Vernon did give Penny an ultimatum because Karissa somehow interfered with their relationship, murder was not the only option. It wasn't even the simplest option. On June 13, 2008, the police arrested Penny Budro and charged her with first-degree murder. The investigators believe that she acted alone and that no one else participated in the crime. After several delays in the court proceedings, on January 30, 2009, 3 days after the anniversary of the woman's heinous act, Penny Budro pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. It was a plea deal she accepted for a lighter sentence than if she had been found guilty of first-degree murder. In her statement in court, she continued to insist that she committed the crime because Karissa stood in the way of her relationship with her lover. "I'm sorry," Penny said in a barely audible whisper. Crown Prosecutor Denise Smith stated that Budro's actions contradict everything that being a mother implies. The judge told Penny that she could never call herself a mother to Karissa again, and the words "Mommy, don't from her loving and trusting daughter would haunt her for the rest of her life. Penny was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. By that time, she would be 55 years old. Sergeant John Elliott also mentioned that he himself visited Carissa's grave twice. She was an ordinary 12-year-old girl. She wanted to become a veterinarian when she grew up. She loved animals. And I think it's important to remember her so that she doesn't just become a line in Nova Scotia's criminal record. It's important to remember her.